US officials are now beginning to recover the passenger jet's black box from the Potomac plane crash. And yesterday, President Donald Trump held an extraordinary press conference and has blamed diversity and inclusion initiatives for the deadly accident. We can now speak to aviation analyst and consultant Alex Macheras, who was with us yesterday, for his insight into the latest developments. Can we begin with what President Trump had to say, Alex, before we catch up on what's actually happening there at the scene and for all the horrors for the relatives of those that have lost their lives? When he was reading sections, wasn't he, from the FFA sort of handbook, if you like, is there any argument that diversity and inclusion initiatives could have had an effect in terms of the air traffic control on the day?
Good morning to you both. Not at all is the quick answer. I mean, last night's press conference, for anyone that didn't see it, was utterly bizarre. As you said, it was extraordinary. I had one US airline executive text me after that the president came across, quote, deranged and grossly insensitive, given that loved ones were being pulled out of the river while President Trump was ultimately spouting nonsense. I mean, the provisions that President Trump was referring to, government provisions to do with employment and diversity hires, do not apply to air traffic controllers. I mean, I'm sure many of the viewers will understand and know that air traffic controllers, I mean, it's an incredibly highly skilled, stressful, high workload profession, and only the smallest number of applicants actually are able to complete the 3-4 year training and end up becoming controllers. The fact that this is being spouted about by a head of state, regardless to whichever head of state it is, in these early hours of an investigation, risks undermining the whole thing. And it's just an unprecedented situation to be in a scenario where aviation has strict policies in place to investigate and then learn from those findings.
I mean, I suppose you're right, of course, this will undoubtedly add pressure on those trying to unpick what happened. But there were other details that fed in to that press conference narrative, weren't there? That there was a concern that there was a reduced number of people on call in air traffic control that night, significantly reduced, which led to people perhaps having to look at too much. That's the question that's been raised.
Well, that was different to Trump's point on the so-called diversity hires. What is true, and Kate, you'll recall that I mentioned this yesterday, is that if we look at the US specifically, the US does suffer from a chronic shortage of air traffic controllers and air traffic control facilities. It's not a global issue. It's very much a US issue. Why? The quick answer is that as the older, more experienced air traffic controllers retired, hiring and training has not kept pace. That was worsened in the pandemic. It's true of many industries, but of a critical part of the sector like air traffic control, it is a concern. And what it has led to is we've got air traffic controllers across the US doing the roles of two rather than their own role. They're working 6 days a week. They're incredibly overworked. They're tired. They're exhausted. And all these make up that perfect storm for potential errors. And while the US is incredibly safe in terms of its reputation for global air safety, for years now, they have been teetering on the edge when it comes to near misses that are a direct result of staffing shortages in air traffic control.
I have to say, that is absolutely terrifying to hear. I mean, it seems that there were 11, so half the number that there should have been in the control booth that night, or the control tower. Help me sort of understand how the law allows that in the first place. I mean, whatever happens here, presumably there'll be radical changes in the regulations governing when, well, frankly, how we keep the airways safe.
Rob, you're right. It's scary stuff. And that's why I actually want to preface this first by saying that this is very much a US issue. Thankfully, for example, we haven't had this issue in the UK. But how has this been allowed to happen? Well, the FAA is a federal body, right? So it's the US government that are ultimately responsible for funding the FAA. And aviation agencies, aviation authorities, airlines, airports, they have been sounding the alarm for years about how, I mean, last summer in July, we had 1 month where there were 46 near misses in 1 month. That's more than one per day. But because nothing happened, it simply hasn't been taken seriously, not just across the previous administration, the Biden administration, but prior to that when Trump was in office, and even prior to that when Obama was in office. And this will now be that wake-up call to get this situation sorted, to focus on hiring, to focus on ensuring adequate staffing levels. But because the US has been able to, commence its air travel operations without an accident until yesterday, nothing was done. And that's why I said yesterday on the show that I think this is going to be a real defining travesty, a real defining accident for US air travel going forward, because they will have finally woken up to the fact that this accident almost certainly could have been preventable.
I mean, one of the things that emerged, which and you, as you rightly say, did put out all these warnings and concerns and questions yesterday, but that in fact, just hours within the day of the horrific mid-air collision, there was another near miss reported between a helicopter and an aeroplane and a jet. Do you have knowledge of that as well?
Yeah, this is something that was released late last night, and I was going through the briefing documents on. Again, it was occurring at the same airport at Ronald Reagan. This is the equivalent to London City Airport, but in the heart of DC. It is one of the most congested airspace areas across the United States. It is also one of the most protected, one of the most secure, because it is just, I mean, is it the skies above the White House, the skies above the Pentagon, and yet you have all of this commercial traffic meeting traffic of the military, combined with staff shortages and a controller doing the work of 2 or 3. He's been there for 6 days, he's tired, he's overworked, it's night time. You quickly see how this becomes the perfect storm. It's super concerning stuff. I think one thing as well that we'll see as a change, direct result from this incident, is the role that the military has to play. Many viewers yesterday were questioning what on earth a military helicopter was doing at midnight on a training flight directly into the approach path of a commercial aircraft. And actually, it was following one of its planned routes. It's known as Route 4. It's something that the military do all the time. And they are told to look out and avoid for passing traffic. Mistakes happen. We've already seen the new Army Secretary nominee say that he thinks that they're going to wind down that activity in such a congested airspace.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Well, thank you, as always, for just enlightening us on this kind of detail, which, as Rob said and we all feel, is just staggering. Thank you very much indeed. And we all still think, though, of the actual reality for those
victims.
of the loved ones of those who are still going through hell today.